Welcome back, everybody. So I think I made a pretty incredible discovery. We're going to start with that, and then afterwards, we're going to consult the Bible about Solomon as a little conclusion. And you're going to see that a lot of what we learned about and talked about seems to be true. There's a great lesson to be learned in the story of Solomon. And little disclaimer, we're going to be looking at the Lesser Key of Solomon again. So it's a dark book. It's certainly evil, but it's a text one would find in a Masonic library. It's a text that's mentioned by Masonic authors. It's a text that was compiled from documents in the British Museum. So we got to understand this is part of the story of the people in control today, part of their belief system, part of their mystery religion. The book discusses 72 evil spirits that Solomon made contact with and learned from. That's what they believe. And these spirits, when invoked, take on different forms. They appear as everything from men to angels to knights on horses to chimeras. Chimera is a Greek word for this like multi-species creature, right? Tail of a dragon, feet of a goat, that sort of deal. They appear as sea monsters. They appear as many different things. And unrelated today, I downloaded a book that's called Burke's Patronage, The Aristocratic Genealogy of Ireland, Scotland, and Britain. And this is published all the time. It's on the right side of the screen. So they'll come out with new editions. This is the 31st edition, University of Pittsburgh. This is the genealogy of the ruling families, the full thing, going back like over 1,000 years. And let's see, let me get to the title page. Genealogical and Heraldic, that's important, Dictionary of the Peerage and Baronetage of the British Empire. This book's wild. Hold on. Sir Bernard Burke, Ulster King of Arms, author of The History of the Extinct and Dormant Peerages, History of the Landed Gentry, Vicissitudes and Families. And then we got a symbol right here. 1869, that's the year. Says the Prince of Wales. Okay, so why this is important is the heraldry. Now, we've talked about heraldry. It's a mystical art, history, science. We still haven't landed on a way of defining it. It's the tradition, though, of creating crests and symbols, and it's the tradition of knowing their meaning, and it's practiced amongst the royalty. So it's something none of us will ever become, and it's very mystical, right? So remember, in the 72 evil spirits that Solomon invoked, they took on all of these different forms, things that aren't natural. And this book on the right, the Genealogical Heraldic Dictionary, has basically every surname and every crest of those three parts: Ireland, Scotland, Britain. Not only that, but all the empire's territories too. So like India, all sorts of metals and like all the information. It's so complex. It's crazy, but we're going to be talking about the symbols, right? So some of them are blatantly connected, overlapping. There's a unicorn right here. That's specifically from the 72 Keys of Solomon, if you watch the previous episodes, right? This is just a random page I scrolled to. We have the unicorn, we have the mermaid, we have the dragon. There was another one. The dragon. The phoenix, right? So I can already think of 4 that overlap, but there's one in particular that seals the deal for me. And I have to preface it by reading some of this, unfortunately. This portion of the book is referring to what the magician is doing about halfway through his invocation. And it's titled The General Curse Called the Spirits. The General Curse Called the Spirits' Chain Against All Spirits That Rebel. So it's discussing how in the act of the invocation, things can go wrong and the spirits, the demons, can be unruly, right? And they can not do what you wish. And that's the magician's job, is to navigate that part and, convince the demon to take the form of man and to do his bidding. So we don't have to read it. I already did. But look at the title. The general curse called the Spirit's Chain, right? Well, I was scrolling through this, and on the page with, and I found it multiple times, on the page with the Methuen family, I want you to watch as I zoom in here. And breathing fire is something the 72 spirits do over and over and over again. In the Lesser Key, that book says specifically that not only are they the cohort of Lucifer, but one was made right after Lucifer. And this is what they believe. And if you look here at Methuen, it has the double-headed eagle of Freemasonry. It has fire-breathing dogs. And look at the chain. There you go. The Spirit's chain around each of the two dogs. That seals the deal for me. This is shocking, because this means that heraldry of the royal families, the ruling families of all the earth, all these crests, all these symbols are derived from demonology. How crazy is that? So these people are demons. Yeah. I mean, we already knew that, but literally they are. Literally, the crest of their families are intentionally depictions of the alleged demons that this sort of magic will invoke. How crazy is that? Look at the chain. Who can deny that? The chain, that's specifically a chain on both their necks. How crazy is that? And the way, okay, that's the shocking thing, if that's all you want to hear. But when we look in the Bible, we're going to find out the Bible goes along with this and says this and teaches a very profound lesson in describing Solomon. So Solomon did turn his back on God, and Solomon did worship false idols. And you're going to recognize the names of the idols he worshipped, and you're going to be like, what? Yeah. And this guy's revered in Freemasonry. That's the thing. And because Freemasonry has infested the Christian church, many people in the Christian church look to Solomon and think he's a perfect character in all this. But all of his worldly accomplishments were the result of him turning his back on God ultimately. And that's what the Bible's going to tell us. We're going to read about it. Pretty crazy stuff. Pretty crazy. Let me show you that thing again. I'll zoom in on the chain. Uh-oh. In the title on the left, the general curse called the Spirit's Chain. The spirits described take exactly the forms found on these crests. There's a phoenix here. There's a phoenix in the list of 72. There's fire-breathing dogs in the list of 72. There's a fire-breathing dog right here. There is a general curse called the Spirit's Chain, and here we have a chain as well. Unbelievable. Crown, of course. It all matches up. So, I guess that's what you learn in heraldry class. If you go to Oxford or one of these crazy schools, Harvard, I guess they give you a copy of the Lesser Key. How unbelievable. Nuts. Okay. Where was I? Bible, right? Let's see where we're gonna begin. In the Book of Kings, there's the whole story that Freemasonry has perverted, and we'll be reading that. But I want to begin in Deuteronomy 17 verse. We're just going to read the first paragraph of 17. So this is about forbidden forms of worship. You shall not sacrifice to the Lord your God an ox or a sheep in which is a blemish, any defect whatever, for that is an abomination to the Lord your God. If there is found among you, within any of your towns which the Lord your God gives you, a man or woman who does what is evil in the sight of your Lord God in transgressing his covenant, and has gone and served other gods and worshipped them, or the sun or the moon, or any of the hosts of heaven, which I have forbidden, and it is told you and you hear of it, then you shall inquire diligently. And if it is true and certain that such an abominable thing has been done in Israel, then you shall bring forth to your gates that man or woman who has done this evil thing, and you shall stone that man or woman to death with stones, on the evidence of 2 witnesses or of 3 witnesses. He that is to die shall be put to death. A person shall not be put to death on the evidence of 1 witness. The hand of the witnesses shall be first again him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. So you shall purge the evil from the midst of you. So, as you can see, in the Old Testament, worshiping any false gods, worshiping any celestial bodies, worshiping the sun, the moon, the stars, is an abomination to God. And it makes that very clear. That's the first one we're going to start with. Just a little back up. Okay, what do we got next? All right, now we're going to begin in the book of Kings. And Solomon speaks with God twice, as far as I discerned. And both times, it's very interesting because the first part, God always says he will, grant Solomon basically his wishes, the things he wants on earth, but he always follows it up with a stark warning, and let's read it. So Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David, until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people were sacrificing at the high places, however, because no house had been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Statutes. Only he sacrificed and burnt incense at the high places, and the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings upon that altar. At Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream, by night, and God said, quote, "Ask what I shall give you." And Solomon said, "Thou hast shown great and steadfast love to thy servant David, my father, because he walked before thee in faithfulness and rightfulness and in uprightness of heart toward thee. And thou hast kept for him his great and steadfast love, and hast given him a son to sit on his throne this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king in place of David, my father. Although I am but a little child, I do not know how to go out or come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, whom thou hast chosen, a great people, that cannot be numbered or counted for multitude. Give thy servant therefore an understanding mind to govern thy people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to govern this thy great people?" Solomon asked. It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. And God said to him, "Because you have asked, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches, or the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right. Behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that no other king shall compare with you all your days. And if you walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days." Then Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Then he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt offerings and peace offerings, and made a feast for all his servants. Okay. So you can see in this dream, he asked God for the ability to have a discerning mind. And as we go through the text, it's going to use the word wisdom, which we'll talk about next real quick, because that's an important word. But that last line, as long as you keep to my statutes and my commandments, right? You see how God is going to give him riches and honor, right? It seems like a test, doesn't it? A little bit. Okay, what do we got next here? 422. Okay. The magnificence of Solomon's rule. Oh, wait, I want to show you wisdom real quick. So, wisdom comes from the Greek Sophia. I can zoom in on this. Make it full screen. There we go. Okay, Sophia is a central idea in Hellenistic philosophy and religion, Platonism, Gnosticism, and Christian theology. originally carrying a meaning of cleverness, skill. The later meaning of the term, close to the meaning of phronesis, wisdom or intelligence, was significantly shaped by the term philosophy, love of wisdom, as used by Plato. So as you can see here, this is a word used not only in Christianity, but in Gnosticism as well. So you have an overlapping term. So whenever you read it, you should always remember that. It's different than the word intelligence. You see, Solomon doesn't obtain intelligence, he obtains wisdom. And wisdom has a metaphysical undertone to it. Intelligence is empirical, right? It's just there. It's just fact. But wisdom borders on the supernatural. Okay, and that's going to affect Solomon after some time. Okay, let's go on here. Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cores of fine flour and 60 cores of meal, 10 fat oxen and 20 pasture-fed cattle, 100 sheep, besides harts, gazelles, roebucks, and fatted fowl, for he had dominion over all the region west of the Euphrates, from Tipshah to Gaza, over all the kings west of the Euphrates, and he had peace on all sides round about him. And Judah and Israel dwelt in safety, from Dan even to Beersheba, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, all the days of Solomon. Solomon also had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. And those officers supplied provisions for King Solomon, and for all who came to King Solomon's table, each one in his month. They let nothing be lacking. Barley also and straw for the horses, and swift steeds they brought to the place where it was required, each according to his charge. All right. We're going to keep reading. The fame of Solomon's wisdom. Here we go, the introduction of wisdom. And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding, right? So you see this is directly from God. So God didn't grant him just intelligence, just discernment. God specifically granted him wisdom. And then he gave Solomon all the earthly goods he could ever desire, right? So you know this theme. We all live with this theme. Okay, here we go. It was wisdom and understanding beyond measure, and largeness of mind like the sand on a seashore, so that Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt. For he was wiser than all other men, wiser than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, and Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol. And his fame was in all the nations round about. He also uttered 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. Remember that. That's the same number quoted in the Lesser Key of Solomon, right? The occultic, Freemasonic, evil book. What else we got here? The Proverbs, and then the songs, yep. He spoke of trees, from the cedar that is in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. He spoke also of beasts and of birds, and of reptiles and of fish. And men came from all peoples to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. Interesting, right? So we can already sense a connection because, and this is verse 33, by the way. This is a Catholic Bible. And it's discussing beasts. It starts with beast. He spoke also of beasts, and of birds, and of reptiles, and of fish. So this is also a connection to the Lesser Key, because the Lesser Key, the 72 evil spirits, the cohort of Lucifer, they're listed as, beasts and animals and fish and all of those things. So that's really interesting. Okay. We're going to move to 513 next. King Solomon raised a levy of forced labor out of all of Israel, and the levy numbered 30,000 men, and he sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month in relays. They would be a month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the levy. Solomon also had 70,000 burden bearers and 80,000 hewers of stone in the hill country. Besides Solomon's 3,300 chief officers, there's a 33 again, who were over the work, who had charge of the people who carried on the work. At the king's command, they quarried out great costly stones in order to lay the foundation of the house with dressed stones. So Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders and the men of Gebel did the hewing and prepared the timber and the stone to build the house. Next one we're going to read is 6-7. And the Lesser Key certainly talked about the forced labor, right? Let's see here. Or no, I believe it was the Bible dictionary. One of the two. So next we're going to read from Solomon Builds the Temple, 6-7. When the house was built, it was with stone prepared at the quarry, so that neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron was heard in the temple while it was being built. Wow. How interesting is that? Because all the pictures and paintings show them swinging hammers. I just find that a fascinating line, because we are talking about sound, frequency, resonance, and this is all speculation, but in the first part we were talking about perhaps in the past Solomon learning from these evil demons the ability to manipulate matter, and I find it very cool that it says, when the house was built, it was with stone prepared at the quarry, so that neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron was heard in the temple while it was being built. They built the temple in silence. Okay, that's it for that page. I think we have a big reading coming up. 631. Okay, here's another overlapping term, and it's called a cherubim, right? I think I have it pulled up. And, it's a term that's used in Hermeticism and Gnosticism, but Christianity as well. So it's one of those things you should keep in mind as well, just like philosophy or wisdom, right? A cherub is one of the unearthly beings who directly attend to God. According to Abrahamic religions, the numerous depictions of cherubim assign to them many different roles, such as protecting the entrance of the Garden of Eden. In Jewish angelic hierarchy, cherubim have the ninth, second lowest rank in Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, 12th century, and the third rank in Kabbalistic works. There you go. So, boom. Right on the top of Wikipedia, it mentions it's got a different interpretation in, the Kabbalah. So, Freemasonry is Kabbalistic as well. Okay. Let's read where that came from, though. It came from 631 of 1 Kings. Let's see, 631. For the entrance of the inner sanctuary, he made doors of olive wood. The lintel and the doorpost formed a pentagon. He covered the 2 doors of olive wood with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. He overlaid them with gold and spread gold upon the cherubim and upon the palm trees. So also he made for the entrance to the nave doorpost of olive wood in the form of a square, and 2 doors of cypress wood. The 2 leaves of the one door were folding, and the 2 leaves of the other door were folding. So this is a symbol depicted in Freemasonry quite often. Those folding leaves are, when they do the archway, symbols of the archway, they often have that. And I bring that up because this is a part of the Bible, God's Word, that Freemasonry perverts. Specifically this part, right? We're at verse 33 again. We began on 31. But notice they mentioned the pentagon and covered the doorway with cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. The palm tree is a Masonic symbol. Remember that military base way up north in Maine, Cutler Naval Radio Station we looked at, and they went through the trouble back in the day of bringing a palm tree up there? They had a bunch of Masonic architecture. That was funny. And then the open flower, right, symbolizing fertility in their minds. So cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, right? So that can go 2 ways. See? That's how the Masons, interpret God's Word and pervert it. All right, we're going to move to 7-7. Let's see. And he made the hall of the throne, where he was to pronounce judgment, even the hall of judgment. It was finished with cedar from floor to rafters. So one of the first discernments he makes, there's 2 women who both have a baby, and they're sleeping, and one of the babies dies. The other one wakes up and notices, the one whose baby died wakes up and notices her baby has passed away. So while the other one's sleeping, she swaps their babies and makes it seem like the other lady's baby died. Ultimately, Solomon says, well, we'll just have to cut the baby in half and you guys will be good. And that's when the true mother said, no, just give her the baby. I could never let that happen. Only the true mother would not let her child be divided in two. And after that, Solomon becomes famous for his judgment. So in the temple, he created a hall with a throne. And from that throne, he was to pronounce judgment. That's what it says in Kings 7:7. And we know what the Bible says about judging, right? Not supposed to. Okay. What else we got here? 7:8. So yeah, the next verse. His own house where he was to dwell in the other court back of the hall was of like workmanship. Solomon also made a house like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken in marriage. Right. So married to the same people that had enslaved his people, Moses, long ago. What else we got here? Oh, this is a good one. Classic. Is that 15? Hold on. Okay, here's where they describe the Masonic pillars, right? This is where Freemasons get the two pillars. Kings 7:15. He cast 2 pillars of bronze. 18 cubits was the height of one pillar. Notice 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the line of 12 cubits measured its circumference. It was hollow, and its thickness was 4 fingers. The second pillar was the same. He also made 2 capitals of molten bronze to set upon the tops of the pillars. The height of the one capital was 5 cubits, and the height of the other capital was 5 cubits. Then he made 2 nets of checker work with wreaths of chain work for the capitals upon the tops of the pillars. Checker work, checkerboard, right? So, yeah, this is how they pervert the Bible. Ridiculous. And of course, the floor of a Masonic temple is a checkerboard. Unbelievable. And then wreaths, of course, that's a big Masonic symbol. And then they also pervert a line up here saying, then he made 2 nets of checker work with wreaths of chain work for the capitals upon the top of the pillars, a net for the one capital and a net for the other capital. Likewise, he made pomegranates in 2 rows around about upon the one network. So in the occult, they take God's wonderful, delicious creation, the pomegranate, and they associate it with Dionysus, which is basically the ancient Greek god of wine and drunkenness and fornication. Of course, Antichrist, right? So it's the Antichrist interpretation of the pomegranate. And this is actually a jar with Dionysus on it, shaped like a pomegranate. Also refers to another ancient god as well, but we'll continue with reading this. I think that does it for this page. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Wait until you hear about the temples he built for other things. You're going to be like, what? I've never heard that. It's crazy. Okay. 8:33. Still in Kings. Going to go to Kings 8:33, of course. Let's see here. When thy people of Israel... Oh, so here he's praying to the Lord, right? And we're just going to read a paragraph of it. So this is Solomon praying. He says, when thy people Israel are defeated before thy enemy, because they have sinned against thee, if they turn again to thee, and acknowledge thy name, and pray and make supplication to thee in this house, then hear thou in heaven, and forgive the sin of thy people Israel, and bring them again to the land which thou gavest to their fathers. So he goes on to say that in a few different ways over and over, and the theme is he's dictating the forgiveness of sins. You notice the language, he's not asking for them, right? He's telling God, when thy people Israel are defeated before the enemy because they have sinned, acknowledge thy name and pray. If they acknowledge your name, Lord, and pray, then please forgive their sins, right? And he goes on to say this over and over and over. And the problem is assumption in the language. We can read another one. The language, keep assumption in mind, right? When heaven is shut up and there is no rain because they have sinned against thee, if they pray towards this place, the temple, and acknowledge thy name, and turn from their sin, when thou dost afflict them, then hear thou in heaven and forgive the sin of thy servants, thy people Israel, when thou dost teach them the good way in which they should walk, and grant rain upon thy land, which thou hast given to thy people as an inheritance. If there is famine in the land, if there is pestilence or blight or mildew or locust or caterpillar, if their enemy besieges them in any of their cities, whatever plague, whatever sickness there is, whatever prayer, whatever supplication is made by any man or by all thy people Israel, each knowing the affliction of his own heart and stretching out his hands towards this house, the temple, then hear thou in heaven thy dwelling place, and forgive and act, and render to each whose heart thou knowest, according to all his ways, for thou and thou only knowest the hearts of all the children of men, that they may fear thee all the days, and that they live in the land which thou gavest to our fathers. So yeah, it goes on to keep asking, but not really asking. It sounds more like he's, sort of expecting or assuming that these things, because the temple is so perfect, if they pray towards the temple or pray at the temple, then, he assumes God will forgive them of his sins. All right, what do we got next here? 844. 844. Solomon's all about the temple. So 844 from Kings is, if thy people go out to battle against their enemy, by whatever way thou shalt send them, and they pray to the Lord towards the city which thou hast chosen, and the house which I have built for thy name, then hear thou in heaven their prayer and their supplication, and maintain their cause. Another example, right? So he's kind of using the temple as an idol. And this will be backed up once we get a little farther along, because this is ultimately what he does. He begins to worship false idols, and he's expecting that this temple he built will be a satisfactory medium, and God will see it and grant him everything. He basically lists everything, right? Locusts, caterpillars, war, all sorts of stuff. Okay, let's continue here. What's on this page? So, God talks to Solomon again. Perfect timing, right? Because Solomon is now, after that long escapade about, sort of expecting things from God, God's about to talk to him. Okay, so in 1 Kings 9:6. 9:6, where we at? Okay, I found it. I'll start a little before it. 9:4. And as for you, if you will walk before me as David your father walked, with integrity of heart and uprightness, doing according to all that I have commanded you, and keeping my statutes and my ordinances, then I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father, saying, there shall not fail you a man upon the throne of Israel. But if you turn aside from following me, you or your children, and do not keep my commandments and my statutes, which I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land which I have given them, and the house which I have consecrated for my name. I will cast out my sight, and Israel will become a proverb and a byword among the peoples, and this house will become a heap of ruins. Everyone passing by it will be astonished and will hiss, and they will say, why has the Lord done thus to this land and to this house? Then they will say, because they forsook the Lord their God, who brought their fathers out of the land of Egypt and laid hold on other gods and worshipped them and served them. Therefore the Lord has brought all this evil upon them. So this time a stark warning. God's telling Solomon, right? He's making it clear. Don't go off worshiping other gods, or I will take Israel back, right? Oh, man. Okay, what's the next one? All right, now we have another verse 922 about his the slaves. Um, so it's in a part called Other Acts of Solomon. It's going on to talk about some of his accomplishments. Let's see here, and it says, "These Solomon made a forced levy of slaves, and so they are to this day. But of the people of Israel Solomon made no slaves. They were the soldiers, they were his officials, his commanders, his captains, his chariot commanders, and his horsemen. These were the chief officers who were over Solomon's work, 550 who had charge of the people who carried on the work. But Pharaoh's daughter went up from the city of David to her own house, which Solomon had built for her. Then he built the Millo. 3 times a year Solomon used to offer up burnt offerings and peace offerings upon the altar, which he built to the Lord, burning incense before the Lord. So he finished the house." Okay, continue here. Okay, this is a good one. It's going to blow your mind. This is going to be a long reading, but it's worth it, so I'm going to take a quick break. Okay, let's continue. So the story so far is praising Solomon for all of his accomplishments, right? Greatest king that ever lived. And then we get to 1 Kings 11, and it says, "Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, the daughter of a pharaoh, and Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, and Sidonian and Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the people of Israel, 'You shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall they with you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods.' Solomon clung to these in love. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after the gods, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his fathers. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. So Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not wholly follow the Lord, as David his father had done." Listen to this, guys. "Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites, on the mountain east of Jerusalem. And so he did for all his foreign wives, and burned incense and sacrificed to their gods." Wow. So there's such a powerful theme in all of this, right? The whole thing centered around earthly dominance, right? Wisdom, possession. So, the theme is be very careful with wisdom, right? Be very, very careful, because it can lead you astray. That's wild. Built a temple for Molech and worshipped all these other gods. Crazy. But yeah, Solomon is a key figure in Freemasonry. These people worship the devil. and in a lot of phony Christian churches, they talk about Solomon in a good light, And most of what we see here is positive, but it's so important. Kings 11. 1 Kings 11 talks about that. There's another section of 11. He had some more failings, apparently. Let's see here. Give me a moment. Okay. "So because he has forsaken me, and worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, and Milcom, the god of the Ammonites, and has not walked in my ways, doing what is right in my sight, and keeping my statutes and my ordinances, as David his father did. Nevertheless, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him ruler all the days of his life, for the sake of David my servant, whom I chose, who kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand, and will give it to you, 10 tribes. Yet to his son I will give 1 tribe, that David my servant may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem." So yeah, Solomon had to live out his days with all of his wisdom, right? It's the ultimate prison. How many times do they play that in Hollywood or media? The theme of somebody having everything but having nothing, right? And we see it all the time in real life. In fact, America is just controlled by this false dream of acquiring material goods and coin, right? Yeah. So that's the theme we get out of Solomon's story. His wisdom was his downfall. He didn't take the 2 warnings he got from the Lord. What do we got here? Let's see. Okay, yeah, and then in Nehemiah 13 it says, "Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin on account of such women? Among the many nations there was no king like him, and he was beloved by his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, foreign women made even him to sin. Shall we then listen to you and do all this great evil and act treacherously against our God by marrying foreign women?" So there it's mentioned again, right? But of course, it wasn't the women that made him turn his back to God. It was him, right? It was him and his love of earthly goods. And when we reflect this against the lesser key of Solomon, it actually, they both kind of make sense. They complement one another, right? So it's not even that these people are hiding the fact that they worship demons, these Freemasons and stuff, but they complement each other. The lesser key of Solomon talks about, these dark occult magic and sciences. And, in the first one, we compared it to today, right? Lucifer is the prince of the air. And out of the air, in the lesser key, Solomon allegedly can summon these 72 evil spirits. That's how the story goes in the Masonic tradition. And that all ties us back in with the word philosophy. Remember how I mentioned philosophy, which translates to the love of wisdom? Sophia is wisdom in the ancient Greek. Yeah, philosophy. So with all that wisdom can come evil, right? Wild. And it ties in because, think about it. The arcane sciences, the dark magic, are ultimately forms of wisdom, right? Just negative wisdom. What else we got here? There's quite a few things. Okay, hold on. So, in this section here, actually, I want to do this out of the Masonic Bible. So let me pause for a second, and then we're going to open the Masonic Bible, and we're going to read a little color section about Solomon with a bunch of pictures, okay? And it's probably going to blow our minds. I've never read it, so give me a sec. You guys aren't even going to believe this. So I'm flipping through the Masonic Bible, and I'm looking for what I remembered, the Solomon's Temple section. And I was like, where is it? I couldn't find it. And I flipped to the beginning, and it's literally the very first thing in this Bible. I'll hold this Bible up for you real quick. Unbelievable. It's even before the presidents. It goes, building of Solomon's Temple, presidents, Genesis. Sick. All right, hold on. It's 1954. Nice, I can hold it up like this. It's going to be tough, but I'll try. The building of Solomon's Temple. So, it's fallen. So, of course, it's depicted in a positive light. And he's got his compass. I see the square. And then see if you can spot the pyramid. I'll hold it up again. I just noticed the creature on his throne sounds a lot like the creatures described in the 72 spirits. And then the pyramid is the rope picking up the perfectly cut rock in the background. Pretty fascinating. I noticed there are no hammers being swung. Remember, no hammers. No tools of iron were heard during the creation of the temple. So on the next page, it gives us some scripture reference, and it says, hold on, let me see, does it have Solomon's errors? Nope, of course it doesn't. It has 1 King 6, page 2, okay, it has 1 King 6, 1 King 7, 2 Chronicles 3, and 4. Says nothing about the errors of Solomon, right? So of course, they're not told to read through all of it. Scene or location on Mount Moriah within the walls of Jerusalem, or Moria. Think of Lord of the Rings, Mines of Moria, remember? And what happens in the Mines of Moria? Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli summon the spirits. They summon the spirits to help them win the war so they can take over the earthly kingdom. Unbelievable. Moria is where the spirits of the dead are. Principal characters: King Solomon, Hiram, King of Tyre, and Hiram Abiff. Particular event or occasion: King David, Solomon's father and predecessor on the throne of Israel, was forbidden by the Lord to build a temple because he was a man of war and had shed blood. He was assured, however, that his son would build the temple, and he was permitted to gather large sums of money to make other preparations for its construction. Soon after his succession to the throne, Solomon planned to build the temple within a period of 7 years. Details of the picture. The preparation for the building of the temple in Jerusalem were immense. David and his princes had contributed 108,000 talents of gold and 1,017,000 talents of silver. About 184,600 men were employed, including 3,300 overseers that we knew from the Bible, 80,000 hewers, 70,000 laborers. I think those numbers match up. Scores of metal and woodworkers, engravers, hundreds of weavers, decorators, and refiners of precious metals. Our picture represents a conference of the 3 leaders in the building of the temple. Solomon, who was 21 years old at the death of his father, was familiar with the designs prepared by David and Hiram Abiff. Hiram, king of Tyre, had been an intimate friend of David for many years, and in an alliance with the king of Israel had prepared much of the material for the temple in the forest of Mount Lebanon and in the quarries of his country. Hiram Abiff, a skilled workman in metal, stone, and wood, was the principal architect and engineer. He served as master mason and overseer in the building of the temple, supervising the labors of the best workmen that could be found. Wow. So remember, the 3rd degree. 3 ruffians approach you. You're portraying Hiram Abiff. You're blindfolded, right? And these 3 ruffians grab you by the collar and shake you and push you to the ground and say, give us the secret word of the master mason. It's all about the word, right? That word is invocation. That's the great secret here. That's what the lesser key of Solomon teaches us. Teaches us that the mason's word, the word of the master mason, is really symbolic of the invocation Solomon used, according to them, to summon these 72 spirits. And if we, look at it from the Masonic perspective, that's why there were no tools heard, right? Because they used the abilities we read about in the Lesser Key of Solomon from these demons. And the demons fulfilled every need of Solomon, if you look at it from the Masonic perspective. And then we find out in the actual Bible, it backs us up. And it says that Solomon worshipped all sorts of different gods. He was, very promiscuous. He built temples for Molech. So I'm seeing a lot of truth in this, of course, right? Truth in the dark side, truth in the truth of, the Bible. So we have to arm ourselves with knowledge, right? We have to use wisdom accordingly. We don't want to use it like Solomon used it and get lazy, right? And start worshiping our earthly goods. Nothing on this earth can give you salvation. Jesus Christ is the only way. Yeshua, right? So, of course, the Mason's Bible doesn't mention what happened to Solomon, but didn't expect that it would, right? I think that sums it up. I learned a big lesson, and now I'm even more convinced that this is all real. The Bible is truth, right? Pretty incredible. Hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you later.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.